I'm Frank, and I'm all about helping business owners and entrepreneurs start and grow their lawn care business. Make sure to subscribe, like, and hit the bell button so you're notified of my future videos. Welcome back, Lawn Care Pros. We're going to continue our conversation with Devin with 417 All Out Lawns. So let's talk about some tips for our audience. If they're starting out, I know you're a Dave Ramsey fan, so talk to us a little bit about, what your recommendations are as far as like leasing equipment, trying to purchase it outright, and give us some options as to how, someone can grow their business and stay debt free.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, not all debt is bad debt. It is personal debt. I mean, even if you sign it up for your business, you're still signing your name to it, so it's still your debt. Um, and that's just one thing that I've chosen to do in my business is as far as just cash flow and everything, making sure you have the cash to buy that mower. And that was easier for me to do. Um, Working full time for the city was to build up a little nest egg, um, and then go buy that mower. I just bought a new trailer this year, and that felt really good. Like I just walked into the dealership and I called the guy, told him what I wanted. He gave me a price, and I said, "Okay, let's do it." He called me 3 days later, said, "Hey, your trailer's here." So I went and picked it up, and I laid $5,000 cash down on the table, and like, here we go. Um, and it felt really good to be able to be in that spot. Um, some guys will tell you, hey, go ahead and finance that mower or whatever for 48 months. I mean, it's interest free, right? A lot of the mower stuff is interest free for 2 4 years, whatever. Um, and that's easy, and that's not a bad idea. But what Dave preaches is good, because you're going to do that, and then if you do that today, say that mower payment's $138, and then you're going to go out and you're going to buy this other piece of equipment or this other piece of equipment, and throughout the summer and the spring, that's great, and then you get into the winter, and you're like, how are we going to pay for that? Because the mowing's over for the season, and then you get into that spot to where how are we going to pay for that? Well, then you start putting your personal life on credit cards, and then you fall into that trap, and that's what credit card companies want you to do. If you are super diligent and super down on your own stuff, if you're super disciplined, then maybe it's not a bad idea. For me, I just like the idea of being able to not buy it unless I had the money for it. And it's so much better as far as like the relief and the stress factor, not having to worry about that piece of equipment. Like, I mean, if something happens to it, yeah, it's gonna suck, but it's paid for. I can go out and buy another one. Do I want to? No, but I have that ability, and I don't have to worry about how it's going to be paid for. And that's just been great, stress and easygoing type of thing for me. So that's why I went that way. I've never leased anything as far as trucks or anything like that. I don't know really much about any of that. I've got some friends that say leasing is better than buying. Um, Me personally, I buy it, and then it's mine. So
Yeah, that's really good advice. I mean, there's certain times where you can do debt and it's okay to do it. But again, like you said, you just have to stay disciplined. But I like your method of taking care of business and being debt free, and pretty much you're able to sleep well at night. That's one of the good things about being debt free, right?
yep, and a lot of my stuff, like I will put like gas on a credit card, but then I just pay it off. I mean, even before the month's over, like as soon as it posts to my account, then I'll just go ahead and transfer the money over to that credit card to pay that off, just to stay debt free. And I mean, I don't preach, using your credit card to for the points. I mean, that's kind of, I mean, you're not gonna get a lot of points by doing that type of thing. Um, why I do that, I don't know. I probably should just use my debit card, to be honest with you. But I put it on a credit card, and then as soon as it posts in 2 days, I transfer it from my debit or my uh, bank account over to my credit card and pay it off.
Very cool. Very cool. So, you're 3 years into the business, and if you were to go back and talk to your uh, self when you were just starting out, what are some of the things that you would tell yourself, to make the transition into the business and the growth of the business a little bit smoother?
Um, I don't know, because it's been pretty smooth, to be honest with you. Um, maybe just having that customer list built strong, more route dense, I guess. Because I was kind of all over town. Our town is from one end of town to the other. It's going to take you 25 minutes. Because I live in Battlefield, but I mean we're 5 miles from Springfield, and Springfield's the big city, if you will. And it's going to take you 20-25 minutes to get from one end of town to the other. And when I was first starting out, I was taking anybody and everybody. I guess if I was going to go back and redo it, I might just really stick down to my area. Like maybe do a quarter of my city, like the if I would to divide it in force, and go into that area where I live, and really grow my business there before going before going into or before quitting the city. Might have been a little bit better because like I've been dropping yards the last couple years of just if it didn't fit into my route. But then you don't want to drop too many because that's your, especially now for me. I mean, that's my livelihood. So I don't want to drop those yards just because they don't fit in my route because I want to replace it with something that does fit. So long story short, I guess I would do more route dense before I got into full time. I would try to grow that business route dense, then go full time rather than just grow it, go full time, and then try to make it more dense, I guess, if that makes any sense.
Oh, absolutely. That's a really good advice. So basically, just concentrate on route density more than you did whenever you were first starting out, because the long-term effect of not having good route density when you're first starting out is eventually, you're going to have to drop off some of those customers that were, 20 miles away, right? That you took on when you first started because, at that time you're like, I'm going to take on whatever I can, right?
Absolutely, and that's what I did. I took on a yard for my buddy, and I ended up getting another yard out there by him. But I mean, that was a 20-minute drive one way, for 2 yards. It paid me $80 to go out there. And people think, well, $80 and I was there for less than an hour. It's pretty good money. Well, then you got to figure in your drive time out there. So now you're, hour and 20 minutes, we'll say, 20-minute drive out, 20-minute drive back. We'll say an hour and 20 minutes total. Um, and especially now, and that was 3 years ago. Now, I mean, gas is almost $4 a gallon. So and the trucks are just going higher. As far as to get a new truck or a new to you truck. I wouldn't recommend anybody buying a brand new truck for this business, just because you're getting in it all hot and sweaty, all summer long. You've got grass all over you. I would not recommend buying a brand new truck. Um, but I mean, even the used truck market's super hot. So you're driving across there for $80 for an hour and 20 minutes worth of work, and now you haven't even done your truck expenses, your mower expenses, any of that. So I mean that $80 is now down to probably 30 or 40, maybe 50 if you're lucky. By the time you deduct all that, I mean, how much money did you really make driving over there? So
Right, absolutely. And so that's something you would tell yourself when you're first starting out, or the our audience that's looking to get started, concentrate on the route density. What are some of the fears that you had when you were first starting out that you don't necessarily have now because you've overcome those fears, or maybe those fears that you had when first starting out, they were really, you know, they weren't justified, right? So what would you tell yourself back then? Like, don't worry about what?
Don't worry about getting customers, because I mean, everybody wants to get their customer list built in February, March, right before the season, and that's when everybody else is wanting to get theirs built too. And I've noticed that this year because, like, knowing I was going into it full time, the 1st of April, like, and I did that this year. Like, I was like, hey, I've got to have these customers. Like, where am I? And I had a few customers drop off from last year. Either they sold their house or their son was getting old enough to mow or whatever. And so I had a few people drop me, and as they were dropping, I'm like, am I okay to quit? And I was super nervous about that. And but I mean, there's so much work out there, and I mean, not for everybody, I guess. Like, I guess if you live in a real rural community, there might not be as much work. But for my area, there's so much work out there, and if I could tell myself something, or back then that I know now, it's just not to worry. I mean, God's got it in His hands. Like I said earlier, if you give God the first 10%, He's going to take care of you, and He has. I mean, He's blessed me and my family. And I mean, I get calls every day of somebody wanting something. So if I was desperately hungry, I mean, there's plenty of work out there, but I've set myself up pretty decent. I feel like, to where I don't have to take all of those little jobs. Like I said earlier, I can stay in my lane, and if those people want a biweekly cut, I'm just saying I don't think I'm your guy. And I'll feel free to. I give friends numbers out all the time, and if a lot of people will say, well, that's your competitor. It is my competitor, but he's also my friend. And if that's something that he's willing to do, if he wants to do a biweekly cut, and Mrs. Jones, that's all she wants, well, that's not going to fit into my um, company profile. So why not still service Mrs. Jones, and tell her, hey, call this guy, you know, and take care of the customer, because you never know. Like, if Mrs. Jones' neighbors, was talking to her and wants a weekly cut, and Mrs. Jones says, well, call Devin because that's all he does is weekly cuts. Okay. So, just because you helped her out, she's gonna remember you. I mean, if you're just a jerk to her and say, hey, Mrs. Jones, like, you know, that's not what my company does. You have a good day. Or, don't even call them back. I mean, I've seen a lot of people uh, not getting phone calls returned. A lot of people, like, on Facebook, or, different areas, saying, hey, I've reached out to 5 different lawn companies and nobody will call me back. Well, don't be that guy. I mean, if you don't want the work, just don't put your name out there right now. And if people do call you, just be a decent human being and call them back and say, hey, my schedule's full, or what do you got, and let's look at it. So I guess, going back, if what I tell myself now is, just don't stress over the customers, because they're going to be there.
You know, I'm really glad that you mentioned that because that's probably one of the biggest fears whenever you're starting a business, right?
Absolutely, it is. Yep. And like I said, I was there. I was in March. I was at Disney with my kids, and I was stressing the whole time, like, how am I gonna, like, whenever I quit my job, how are we gonna do this? And I was saying yes to every customer that called, and now I've got 4 or 5 customers that are biweekly, and that's not what I want. But I'm not gonna drop them in the middle of the year, um, because I want to take care of them. So, I mean, biweekly is not awful, I guess, because you're still in that area. I mean, it's every other week, so, one week you're doubling your workload, when you're in that area. And that's just one thing I don't like, is because, like, this week, I didn't do any of my biweeklies, or this last week I didn't do any of my biweeklies, because they're all, the 3 or 4 that I have are all set for this week. Well, now this week it rained all week. So if I don't hit them, then I hit them next week. Now they're going to be 3 weeks out, and that's just not what I want. I mean, if if it's a biweekly cut, I want it to be because the weather or something that I did. Um, if I was sick, or if a piece of equipment was broke down or something, and I mean, obviously, I'm going to communicate that with them. And I mowed yesterday because it was nice out, and so I got all my Monday stuff done. So today it's raining all day, and I don't have to stress about being behind, or calling all those customers and saying, hey, everybody's going to be a day out now, because I'm trying to get caught up. So just communication with everybody is big too. So
Absolutely. And this is not business related, but you mentioned that you went to Disney with your family. How was that?
yep, that was great. And that's working the last 3 years, doing the lawn care on the side. That's what paid for our Disney trip. Not all 3 years, but that got us out of debt, and that's what we told our kids. Whenever we get out of debt, we're gonna go to Disney, because my girls are 9 and 6, and they missed out on a lot of dad time in the last 3 years, because I was working, 8 to 5, and then I was going to mow from 5 to 9 when it got dark, and I was doing that, 5 days a week, and then I was mowing whatever I had to do on Saturday and Sunday, and so we got out of debt, and we went to Disney, and had a great time as a family, and came home and quit my job and went full time with the lawn care. So.
That's pretty cool. And was Disney a little bit different this year or than the last few years or?
So this was the first time for any of us to be at Disney,
Oh, okay,
my
cool.
wife or I, or the kids. So I mean, we really didn't know Disney prior to the pandemic. The characters, like Mickey and Minnie and all the characters, like you couldn't give them a hug. Like the kids couldn't go up and give them hugs or high fives or anything.
Oh,
They could take pictures, but it was like Mickey was standing behind them. But like my kids loved it because they still got to see Mickey, and they didn't know, I mean, when we go back, I mean, we had a great time, and we'll definitely go back. And when we go back, hopefully there's not a pandemic going on, and the kids can give Mickey and Minnie a hug, and then it's going to be even more exciting for them at that time. So because now they can do more. So.
that's pretty cool. So, talking about like biweekly, you mentioned that it's not all that bad, right? And I wanted to ask you, do you charge a little bit more for biweekly or do you have a formula that you kind of go with? Is it like, 1.5 times or tell me how you handle biweeklies?
Yeah, I do, about 1.5. Um, and I talked to one guy here in town, and he gave me a really good scenario on that. If any of the listeners do want to go bi-weekly, a good way to sell somebody on that is, so if you're going to charge them, we'll say $35 a week. That's going to be a $70 cut. And for 2 weeks, 35 today, 35 next Monday, it's $70. Or if you tell them, hey, I'm going to charge you $60, for a biweekly cut. Now we've cut your cost down $10 every 2 weeks, $20 a month. I mean, that's a good way to sell somebody on that, right? And not everybody will do that. Some people will charge them. If it's a $35 cut, they'll charge them $45, and which is okay. But I mean, why not charge them that? Charge them 60. You're making an extra $20 or $15, and that's a good way to sell somebody on that. Like, hey, I'll do it for 35 a week, or I'll do it for 60 every 2 weeks. So, and then they're going to look at it, and they might not look at it, but I mean, it's something that you could explain to them, like, hey, I can save you $10, every 2 weeks if we do this, and everybody makes a little bit of money. So I thought that was a great way to look at it, if that's something that you wanted to do. But I like to stay on top of it, and especially if they're fertilized yards. I mean, you know how it is. I mean, they're going to grow like crazy, and if you wait 2 weeks, you're going to have grass everywhere. I mean, clumps of grass. If you're bagging it, maybe, but then you've got a lot of extra grass that you're hauling away. Um, so it's just not something that I like to do. The biweeklies I do have, they're very shaded yards. They don't get a lot of sunlight. Um, they're not like a great yard. They're not a golf course yard. if you will.
Yeah.
Um, they've got a lot of weeds in them. So, I mean, they're not going to grow super thick. And that was one reason I did keep them as a biweekly, and I was okay with it. But just anybody else that calls now, I just tell them, that's not what I'm looking for in my business. And if they say, "Can you come out and give me a weekly price?" Sure, I'll come out and talk to you. But and it just saves me from having to drive out there if they're not even interested in a weekly price. Um, and like I said, it's not for everybody. Some people would rather do a biweekly cut than by all means, go talk to those people as well.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, like those lawns that are like lush and they're getting fertilized and those really grow quickly. And if you're doing them biweekly, it's really hard on your equipment too, isn't it?
It it is, and it's harder on the equipment. I mean, it's bogging down. If you have, like this year, I bought the new Ferris Z3 stand on. It's got a 37 horse motor. I mean, the thing's just a tank. And I don't know of any grass that's gonna bog that mower down, but it's gonna make it run harder for sure. And the harder it runs, the more gas it's burning. And like you said, just harder on pulleys and belts and the whole 9 yards. So I mean, definitely charge more. Don't give them a weekly price for a biweekly cut. So, and that's what a lot of people will want. Especially on a lush yard. If they're looking for a biweekly cut, they're looking to save money. That's the only reason they're doing it, because it's no time off of them, right? I mean, they're not mowing it, they're not doing anything with it. All they're looking for is to save money, and and it's going to be hard to make any money on those if you're charging them weekly price for a biweekly cut, because you're going to be going over it twice. You're going to have a lot of extra grass laying around that you're going to have to spread out somewhere. You're going to get those stragglers that you're going to have to double cut different parts of it. So definitely, I mean, I'm not saying that you have to charge them double, because, and like I told one guy, I was like, I'm not going to charge you double because I'm already here. So I'm not driving over here, but I am going to charge you more because I'm going to be here longer. And and if they're okay with that, then by all means. But
Sure. And you mentioned, you when somebody calls, you'll go out and take a look at the lawn and give them an estimate for, preferably the weekly cuts. Do you have a formula for that, or do you kind of just eyeball it, or you're just really familiar with, your area where you feel comfortable in your numbers?
yeah, so whenever I go out and look at a property, I just eyeball it, and I have a pretty good idea on how long it's going to take me, by just eyeballing it. I've seen some guys, they'll tell you, this tree is going to take you 3 seconds to trim it, and it's going to take you an extra 3 seconds to mow around it, and so you can kind of build your minutes. I don't go into all that. I just eyeball it. If I think it's going to take me an hour, I want $80 an hour, so it's going to be an $80 cut. Um, and that's just kind of how I do it. Not that that's right or wrong, but that's what I do. So.
Okay. And have you ever been like way off on an estimate where you had to come back and maybe readjust it?
I have been low on some yards, and I not way off, and I didn't adjust it mid season. I waited till the end of the year and told Mrs. Jones, "Hey, if you want me next year, it's going to be this price," just because I was a little bit low this year. And a lot of times they're fine with that if they know it ahead of time. I would definitely not just do it without telling them. I have heard of some companies that, like this year they went into the season, and because of inflation and everything else, they just raised the prices $5-10 per cut. And I've gotten a few customers that way because they got their first bill and saw it was $10 more, and they weren't okay with that because the company didn't, or the business didn't tell them it was going up.
Mm.
They got upset, and they're just like, if you'll just tell us straight up, like, we understand that everything goes up, but don't try to hide it from us. So like I said earlier in the podcast, is just be straightforward and good communication, and let people know what it's going to cost. So
Great advice. Great advice.
if you miss that estimate, then I'm not saying that you can't adjust that mid season. Um, just be honest with them, and talk to them, and give them that option. Like, I understand like my price is going to have to go up, and I understand that I told you it was going to be $40. Um, but it really needs to be 55, we'll say. And if they say I can't do 55, then don't drop them right there. Go ahead and finish that out. Give them a 2 weeks notice, just like you would an employer. And let them know, like, okay, hey, I'm not going to drop you right now because you need time to find somebody. But here's your 2 weeks notice. I'm going to mow it the next 2 weeks, and then I'm going to be done.
That's really good advice. And one more real quick question for you. So whenever you go out to a new lawn and it's a jungle, right? How do you charge for that?
That's a great question. I try not to do those if it's a complete jungle, and the only reason is you don't know what's laying in that yard. These mowers are so expensive; they're so expensive to work on. If you hit a water meter, if you hit fence posts that you don't see, I mean, there's so much stuff that can be laying in that jungle. Um, so that's kind of where I'm at. If I do want the yard, if I do see potential in it, I'm just going to charge them probably an hour rate, and that hour rate's going to be high. It's going to be up over $100, 110, $120 an hour, and I'm going to take a weed eater and I'm going to weed eat that entire property and just knock it down. And maybe if you have to weed eat it twice, but then not only are you weed eating it, but you're also walking it. So hopefully you can find anything that's laying in there, and get it picked up or weed eat around it or whatever, so you can see it before you get your mower on there. But I would really caution guys. I mean, like I said, these mowers are expensive. So make sure you price good for that, because if you hit something, you break something, it's not on them. You know, you you took the job, so I would just caution guys to watch out for that. So
Yeah, that would be a complete nightmare if uh, took on a job like that and then you hit something and heaven forbid damage something or you damage your mower and
right,
potentially now you got to get a new mower or you got to get some expensive repairs done, and that kind of sets you back quite a bit.
absolutely, yeah. And that's like I said, and if it's not completely, I mean, if it's not knee high or something, then I guess you could walk it, and just try to see hazard that's in it. There, not necessarily are you going to catch everything, but definitely get out there and walk it before you put your mower on it. So
Absolutely. Devin, this was a really good time. I enjoyed interviewing you and getting some really good advice for our audience. Devin with 417 All Out Lawns. Again, we really appreciate it, and we hope we can revisit as your business continues to grow and prosper.
yeah, I appreciate your time, and thanks for reaching out to me. Thanks for putting me on this podcast. I really enjoyed it. And if anybody has any questions as far as stepping out on your own, feel free to reach out to me. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, 417 All Out Lawns. Shoot me a message through my website, and I'd be glad to connect with you guys as well.
All right. Thanks again, Devin. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Frank.
I hope this information was helpful to you. Make sure to subscribe, like, and hit the bell button so you're notified of my future videos. See you next time, lawn care pros.